Welcome to another edition of the Mindful Masculinity Podcast. As we head into a new year, most of us guys tend to do some of the same things. We make a few vague promises in our heads. I'm going to get in shape. I'm going to be a better partner. I'm finally going to get my money situation right. And then life happens. Work takes over, the kids, the house, your health. Something needs your attention. And the next time you finally look up at all of those goals you had set for yourself, you find it's the coming New Year's Eve. And if you're honest, not a lot has actually changed. And what I want to do today is invite you with my guest, Damon Mitchell, into something a little different. Instead of these goals or resolutions, Damon and I want to propose to you treating 2026 as an intentional year, something where you're exploring your purpose so that you can motivate yourself so that when 12 months from now you say, yeah, I looked at what I intended to do and I showed up differently.
Mm.
Not because you became someone different, not because all of a sudden you developed willpower, but because you got really clear on what mattered to you, to what you value inside, and you built some kind of structure around that to maybe reach some goals.
Mm.
Now, here's the twist. A lot of men, including me, we pride ourselves on being good at just winging it. You know, we're improvisers. We figure it out on the fly. We handle crises. We always tell ourselves we are so capable of rising to the occasion. And that's actually backed up by data. If you look at Spencer Greenberg's clearer thinking gender continuum test, men tend to score slightly higher relative to women on being improvisational. And depending on your other gender continuum strengths, you might even be more improvisational. We're not sure why that is. It's likely a mix of nature and nurture, but that's the problem. Being improvises there. Being that way can be a blessing and a trap. Because if your whole life is, I'm going to figure this out, you can end up with a lot of good intentions, but not a lot of successful goals and resolutions.
Mm.
And that can happen to anything from our relationships, our exercise goals, our emotional lives. So, this conversation is for you if you're tired of feeling like every year is just a remixed version of the last. You have good intentions, but they mostly live somewhere inside. And you'd like this time next year to be an occasion for you to look back and say, I can see the results of the way I chose to live. In this episode, someone I'm trying to call a dear friend, Damon Mitchell, and I are going to talk about why men struggle with goals and intentions in the first place, how our improviser can sometimes sabotage us, and maybe put together some ideas about how over the next 12 months you can stick to your intentions that lead to your goals.
Mm.
So if you're listening to this on a commute, you're on a walk, you're hiding from your family in the bathroom, whatever, what we want to hopefully accomplish with you is that you can be able to say to yourself, by this time next year, I did something, I accomplished something, and it was true to who I am. So let's get into it. First of all, I want to welcome Damon Mitchell. Damon is a former personal trainer, he's a serial entrepreneur. He is the owner of Intentionalize My Life Coaching. He runs a number of men's groups, and he is the author of The Tolerance of Men Substack, which, if you haven't subscribed at this point, you're going to go find him today. And that is going to be one of your New Year's resolutions, is paying attention to Damon on Substack. So thanks for joining me here, Damon, as
Yeah.
we head into the new year. How are you feeling in terms of intentions for 2026?
Yeah. Unsettled. It's
Unsettled.
yeah. Talk about eating your own dog food. It's I have not settled on a clarity around my intentions, which I'm okay. I feel like I've got some time, but it's definitely feeling like in the next couple of days here, I've got some ideas, but I'd really like to get something clear and I'm pointing at my whiteboard where my intentions from last year are looking at me. I'd like to put that up there so I
So
have that.
you have a tremendous amount of experience in this space.
Yeah.
As a fitness coach, I would
Yeah.
imagine every January you probably had new clients
Oh,
with
yeah.
new goals. As a men's group leader, you're constantly dealing with men, bringing to you things that they are challenged with and probably looking to improve on.
Yeah.
So, what's your personal experience as someone helping others with the whole concept of New Year's resolutions?
Ugh. First of all, I should point out that it was really just the first couple of years in the fitness industry that I was a trainer, and then I moved into leadership roles.
Mhm.
But that didn't get me away from the whole culture of goal setting. In fact, it really sent me deeper into it because now it wasn't just about the goals of the members, but it was the goals of either the department heads that were reporting to me or the frontline team members. So the fitness industry, people might not know this, is 100% built around goal setting from the front line of what it does with its members, but all the way up to like how the business is structured. We would have business planning documents that would be like, goals, strategy, tactics. And this is kind of the backbone of all of our conversations. Um, and so, really, I spent about an entire decade grappling with this thing of goals that, I think most people can attest, are usually unsatisfying when they're finally played out. And it
Yeah.
wasn't until I got away from that and spent some time writing and thinking and reading that I came to the conclusion that really what's missing from our goal program is being clear about our intentions. Like, what exactly is it we're trying to do or wanting to try to do before we start? 'Cause people love setting. I mean, this gets pushed everywhere. So, got to have goals for the new year, and I'm the guy saying, yeah, really, maybe, maybe, maybe if you've really thought about your intentions with this, because in my experience, and you know, you can share your experience, most people's goals are just a thing they do one time and then something else happens.
Yeah. So I spent 15 years at American Express. Um, I was a people leader. I was an individual contributor. I was a chief of staff to a senior vice president. So
Mm,
I have a wide experience level as someone who had to go through annual goal planning. My team had to set up goals for the coming year, and then individually, each person had to sort of ladder up into me. And then, of course, helping Tom run a multi-billion-dollar business that had both a sales and a client management set of teams in about, I think we were 600 people across the US and Canada.
wow.
We had specific goals that the company was expecting us to deliver on, and they had dollar symbols behind them.
Yep.
And so, yes, so much goes into setting these goals, the forecast from financials, um, data that we had depending upon things like employee engagement scores, and so much could disrupt it. What I tried to do in my 15 years at American Express and at other companies where I did goal setting and reviewing is what you so wisely instructed me and why we're here today is what's our intention?
Yeah.
You know, that is not going to change because that's who we are as a company, as a culture.
Yeah.
It's who we are as a brand. When I ran marketing and branding for a independent insurance brokerage, our why, the Simon Sinek why, was, you just couldn't change it. It was immutable.
Mm,
And so having intention to me was always the strongest element of whether or not we set good goals and whether or not we had a chance at achieving them. So that's why I loved it when you brought up this idea of let's talk more about intentions.
yeah.
Because if you know who you are and what you are, your intentions shouldn't change.
Yeah. Yeah, certainly not in the short. I mean, in the short run, I suppose they could evolve over time,
Yes.
and that's a kind of complicated conversation around like how intentions come to be. But I am of experience that they always are in the background. They're just so often not articulated. They're not identified. I mean, this,
Right.
you spoke a little bit to this. This is what happens in business. We start with the outcome that we want to get to, and then that gets handed down and chunked down, and then everybody goes, okay, well, how do we break that up over the course of a year to make that happen? And that's fine. It's a way that it's been done. I think we're gonna struggle to like rip that from the cold dead hands of any CEO. Like that's not going to go away.
Right.
Um, but I'm tending to think about this more in terms of like one's own life and what they want to make happen. And what I find is that when people set goals, and goals are outcome based, they're a lagging metric of a bunch of other things we do until we get there. But when they do that at the beginning of the year, they've completely failed to grapple with this underlying set of intentions that exist, but they haven't identified it, and they haven't looked at, do my intentions align with this outcome? And so if you miss that critical step, then the outcome is a nice idea, and maybe once in a while it happens because it accidentally lines up with intentions or the winds shift and someone gets lucky. But I think more often than not for us, I mean, by February we've moved on, you know.
So, so taking your experience
Yeah.
as someone in the leadership space, someone in fitness, someone in men's work,
Yeah.
and this is mindful masculinity. Why do you think, or without saying men don't fail to achieve their goals or their resolutions, why do you think men struggle with achieving goals, resolutions based on their ability to be intentional?
Why do I think that men struggle to achieve their goals? Is that the question? Did I just flip that
That's
around?
pretty much it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. My sense of it is going to be so people who focus on goals tend to be the sort of people that are competitive. They're very focused on the outcomes of what they do. My wife's a
Right.
great example. She's very competitive. Like winning is both her greatest attribute, and also it can be one of her darkest challenges, depending on the circumstances. So she tends to be very outcome oriented. What will happen after I do this thing? How will I get to the point of winning? And I think I don't have the data. You can tell me if you have anything to support this, but my sense of men is that we are almost hardwired for competitiveness in this way. We have a special penchant for needing to win. And so I think what happens for us, and the reason we get energized around goals and setting goals, is this underlying competitiveness. I'm going to set these, audacious goals and hope that by hook or crook somehow I get there, because sometimes I do and sometimes that feels really good. And I think the missing piece is just that nobody has bothered to pull really any of us aside and say, yeah, but what are your intentions here? Like, what are you really
Right.
trying to make happen? We're thinking about the prize, the trophy, the title, the headline, the winning, sort of like the finale, which is great. It makes for great storytelling, great stories. Um, but I just think this is one of those things where nobody went, hang on a second, hang on. Um, It might be
It's
the answer to
interesting.
your question. Sorry, I think the answer might be that men index higher for trying, and that's why they index higher for failing.
I definitely, and trying to me, I would go a little bit deeper on trying to say men are typically held to certain types of measurements that are not tied to intention. Intention is seen more as a personal motivation, a broader purpose in life. And I believe from an early age, men are taught no, you're going to play in Little League because you're going to make it to the varsity team.
Yeah.
And you will be judged on whether or not you made it.
Yeah.
And then once you're on the varsity team, it's your batting average. It's, how
Mm.
many times you knocked in a run, whether or not you can throw a ball at 80 miles an hour versus 72 miles an hour.
It never ends.
And I just feel like for so many men, we spend so little time trying to understand, well, who are we? And I see this a lot in men who get into professions and they're very good at what they do, but they also find this disconnection emotionally at some point in their lives where they're like, why the hell am I doing this? How did
Yeah.
I get here?
Yeah.
So I kind of feel a lot of it has to do with, and I know this is where you and I get concerned about pathology, but I really do feel it has something to do with a man's emotional awareness. And funny enough, Spencer Greenberg's clearer thinking continuum test shows that females index higher on emotional awareness than men. And I think a lot of independent research demonstrates that's true.
Mm.
And I think that's part of the problem is too often men are like, no, I want to be the guy who hits 125% a goal because I got to be in the top three sales award structure next year because I was
Yeah.
only fifth this year.
Yeah.
And that's how I'm going to determine my self worth. Versus, I really like selling this product or service because my customers love it. And it is a good product and service. And I help them solve problems in their company. They don't go in that direction necessarily.
Yeah. You're highlighting that those sort of underlying incentives are not as easy. Picking a goal is arguably easy and can be completely and often is arbitrary. Whereas
Right.
identifying intentions, the funny thing is I don't actually think it's that hard, but I think it feels hard. It feels like I need to like look inside and I need to do all this hard work. Whereas if I just often will ask, I mean, people get asked this all the time. What were your intentions here? Just casually in conversation or when we're on the hot seat over something and we have an answer for it. We always do. We just hadn't thought about it. You go to a
Right.
group of men and then you're like, I know you guys have these goals for the years, but what are your intentions? They're all going to kind of pause for a second. Like, oh, crap. Now I have to do some hard work. It feels like work to think about intentions. And I don't know if that's because it's a matter of like coming in contact with the soft underbelly of who we are at our core, or if it just doesn't feel as easy as going 110% of goal. Bing, got it. I know the right answer here.
Well, funny enough, today of all days, you published an article about the present of presence.
Yes.
And in it, you made some really insightful points about perhaps what I personally consider the main condition men need for setting a year of intention.
Mm.
So if you don't mind, I'm going to read
Oh
a
boy.
couple of sentences from your Substack today.
This is raw, Richard.
Oh, I couldn't help myself once I read it this
I
morning.
love it. I love it. Let's do it.
It shouldn't surprise me that in that space and in the space of my coaching sessions, presence often makes it to the table as a
Mm.
strategy or goal. By simply introducing the word presence, it has this quiet gravitational effect where men find themselves wanting more of it.
Mm.
For men, presence also happens to be a quality we keep abandoning seemingly by accident.
Mm.
So, when I read that, and given what we just talked about a few seconds ago, um, to me, this is like the first step for anyone trying to set, whether you're going to call it a New Year's resolution, a 2026 goal, whatever you're going to call it.
Yeah.
You are more likely to get there, in my humble opinion, if you work on presence.
Mm.
How do you feel about my connecting presence to succeeding in goals?
I think that's sage. I'm actually curious if I can just flip this around just a little bit. I don't know if this
Okay,
is allowed, but I'm curious to know how you're
flip all you
interpreting.
want.
How are you interpreting what you just read there of what I wrote?
What I'm interpreting is that this concept of intention comes from us knowing who we are,
Mm,
being present in a moment, and saying to ourselves, how aligned is this goal that I have in my life with what I'm feeling right now? So I'll give you a very personal example for me.
please.
My 2026 goal for mindful masculinity is to finally launch more opportunities for men, like you have in your men's group, more opportunities for men to learn this practice of being present, of being mindful. Because when something happens in our lives, let's take that proverbial sales guy,
Mm,
and he nails it. He gets, 125% to goal. He gets the award. How does he feel the day after he sees the final results for the year? How does he feel about himself and what he accomplished? How does he feel about the clients he sold to? A lot of men never touch on any of that. And every year they're just pumping it out, pumping it out, pumping it out. And as far as I'm concerned, if you are truly happy in your life, more power to you.
mm,
I'm not saying people have to be, you know, connected to themselves and emotionally aware to have a happy life. I personally do, but I've worked with salespeople. I've helped lead sales teams and done sales training, and I know so many people who are just like, no, the hill was everything. That was the dopamine. That
mm,
was the oxytocin, baby. That's all I needed. Just keep giving it to me.
mm.
And however else their lives unfolded during the year came sort of secondary to that constant feeding of the neurotransmitters. Um, but then I also knew a lot of people where, you know, they didn't get that same kick, and they did feel this push and pull from the rest of their life. And there was some kind of pain from that. So that's how I interpreted your Substack
Yeah.
is for the bulk of us, I think being present and saying, is what I'm doing right now in this moment aligned with who I am and what I am? Or do I just abandon presence by accident because I just don't have that emotional awareness? It's just not there.
Yeah. That's awesome. Thank you. So
I
you're
don't know. That's just
no,
my,
no. I love this because it's funny because I hadn't necessarily connected these dots, although they both live in the space that I'm thinking and operating in. But I'm with you. What you're articulating is that under goals or foundational to goals is what are our intentions, and then deeper to that is our relationship with presence. Because if you think about somebody on one side of the spectrum who has a strong relationship with presence, tapping into what their intentions are is a fairly easy move. It's probably a constant, something they can articulate with ease, and then figuring out what goals they want to set based on that again becomes easier. Whereas if you have somebody on the other side of that spectrum who's not in relationship with their presence, who feels like it's this thing that they can't identify, but they kind of want, and they've had it, and they sort of know what it is, but they don't know how to make it happen. It's this weird paradox of wanting and not sure how. That person's going to struggle with identifying what their intentions are, and therefore goal setting is going to be like, I don't know, what's going to help me beat Bob this year or this quarter, and then I'm going to get that dopamine hit, and then immediately hit the dissatisfaction piece of that, and just set another goal and run after that. And that's kind of living along the surface of life, chasing goals as if that's going to ultimately ever satisfy us. You're saying to get that deeper feeling of, and I'm adding this word in, that satisfaction comes from tapping into presence in whatever way.
and it is a significant variable in human life is our nature. But I was thinking about that football player who I think he's a Dallas Cowboy. He recently committed suicide after being in a police chase.
Mm,
Um, Yeah, it was a and the like days before this unfortunate, it was just recent in the last couple of months.
Mm.
Just days before, the man had scored his first touchdown. He was a defensive player. Um, and you would have thought, here he is, probably worth millions. Most NFL players, have a pretty good income. Um, he has now achieved what so few football players, especially on the defensive side, do: score a touchdown.
Yeah.
Um, and yet his life was still so unsatisfactory to him. He was in love. He had a woman in his life. He was loved by family members. And again, without knowing any of his, perhaps concussive issues, maybe he had some issues mentally, or depression. Still, was this man aligned enough with life that he couldn't at some point say to himself, my intention is to endure. When I was going through the worst parts of my divorce, I was owning a coffee shop, and it was a Friday, I think, when my son texted me and said, Dad, Child Protective Services was here, and they said some really ugly things about you.
Oof.
And this was in the middle of an ugly divorce that was dragging on. It was extremely stressful. I was barely sleeping. I was running a place that needed my attention 7 days a week. The other individual had a very good, steady salary, so could fund stuff in the courtroom. And now, one of the most important things about my identity, being a father and hopefully being seen as a good father, someone who is nurturing, I was being judged about that. And I had no place to stay because it was unsafe to be in my own home. And so I slept that night on the couch of a very dear friend of mine. She was away,
Mm.
and she let me enter her home for the evening. And I remember laying on that couch thinking suicide might be the best thing for me, because
Mm.
what is the way out for me in this situation? This person's got me on the ropes, and I cannot emotionally and mentally do this anymore. But my core, my intention to be a supportive father who was going to be there for his kids, that was so core to who I was. My Simon Sinek why was taking care of my kids. That was the voice that won over. Just give up, Richard. You're never going to win this.
Yeah.
And so I don't think I have any depressive genetic qualities. I have situational depression at times. But I do believe that, being in touch with that core intention can help you overcome and achieve your goals, because eventually divorce was settled,
Mm.
and I've had some ups and downs since then, but without a doubt, the right choice was to stay in the game. Um, and that's, that core intention to me, for any man in any situation, um, seems to be why you achieve your goals.
I want to respond to a lot of what you just said there, but the first thing I want to respond to is just an expression of gratitude for sharing something so very personal. I can imagine many people listening to this can relate to that, even if it isn't so far as to be at that point, but that moment of despair where that which we're connected to as what's important feels disconnected from us, and it maybe makes the most sense to just not be anymore. I think a lot of people can relate to at some level, and how far people have explored that is a very real and, in my opinion, important thing that we talk about. I know we kind of like to sweep it under the rug, or oh, this thing happened, and the I think it was Penn of Penn and Teller was talking about this one time, if I'm attributing this correctly. But the way he articulated is we have a person who considered that their best option in this moment was to end their life. And then we all want to not talk about it or skate around it because it's a scary, difficult thing. I know that's not the center of what we're talking about today, but that's where I'm coming from as I just slow down and say, hey, man, thank you for sharing that. That's really meaningful to me. What you're talking about as the undercurrent of that thinking process is that your your connection to your sense of purpose was being severed by this person who was very savvy and financially backed in a courtroom and was putting you through your paces in a very unfair, sounds like unfair way. And grappling with that sort of felt like, well, if I can't have this, then what's my purpose? And maybe there's just no reason to be here anyway. And what I hear you saying underneath all of this is that there's a very strong connection between what we call our intentions and what we might start to talk about as our purpose. I'm not sure if I'm hearing you say they're the same thing, but these are very close neighbors. Like those kind of new neighborhoods where there's no grass between the houses. They're practically right on top of each other.
Yes.
Um, and our failure
I guess my
to
intention to survive came
mm,
from my purpose, my why, which was I'm the father of three children who I admire and I
yeah,
love, and I want to see them flourish. And if I'm not here, A, I'm going to put the trauma on them
yeah,
of my choice. And who knows what that's going to do to them for the rest of their lives. And B, I won't be here
yeah,
to do the things that I think a father should do for a child. So
yeah,
there's like that blurring line between purpose and intention in this particular situation.
yep.
Um, you know, that I didn't see a difference between the two.
This is something I actually run into a lot with men who the difference between men who have children and those who don't. And children are this great regulator of choices. From I was living a life as a pretty casual alcoholic and drug user, and I had a kid, and suddenly I had a toddler, and they're up at 4 in the morning, whether I've slept or not, and I don't have time for drugs and alcohol anymore. To another guy who is going through a divorce or has been through a divorce and has figured out that being a drunk isn't working because he needs to be a good dad to his children. Like this is something that comes up frequently where children become this great regulator for at least for the men that I talk to. I'm sure this is true for women as well. Um, and it's not exactly there, for men like me who don't have children, which only then emphasizes your point that being clear about our intentions becomes really important in those situations. Prospectively, someone who doesn't have a kid isn't going to feel that strong pull of responsibility and
So, where else do they gather a personal
yeah,
purpose that helps them set
yeah,
intentions?
yeah. How do you know the bottom of the barrel if you don't have children calling for you
Right.
to be there for them?
Well, you introduced me to someone who hit the bottom of the barrel when you forwarded me a really interesting Substack essay from Stuff Guys Don't Talk About.
Mm,
I definitely recommend people
Jim's work.
watching
Yeah,
this to review it. What happens when we see traditional masculinity as the floor instead of the ceiling? And what the author did was they developed this story. They anonymized a client named Ben who, when he turned 20, he realized that the things he was doing to himself weren't working and no one was going to come and save him. And Ben went through a transformation. I would love to know more about that situation
yeah,
and where Ben is today. But Ben talked about how his stepdad said something that stuck with him. When you go to sleep at night, there's only you, your brain, the pillow, and your thoughts. And boy, do I relate to that. You're the only one who's going to be there to keep you honest. No one else is going to tell you, don't do that or don't do this. So you're in charge. Ben kind of hit the bottom
yeah.
and had to make a decision. Not all men hit the bottom. Um, so I guess, what do you think? Does it take us like, facing some life crisis to set really ambitious goals and find intention to achieve them? Or can anybody do it in more modest situations?
Look, anybody can wake up to what we're talking about and decide this is making sense to me. I haven't really identified my intentions. I'm going to start doing that. But as somebody who counts himself among the recovering with alcohol and drugs, I'm biased towards believing that we got to lose something important most of the time in order to wake up. To go, "Oh, gosh, what I'm doing isn't really wise." And I don't know if that means we're suddenly born into a world of valuing intentions, but I mean, certainly was the in my case, was a pivotal point in my life. What was that now? 12 years ago, I guess. That like this isn't working.
You've written
And
about it.
yeah, yeah. It's funny because I didn't used to. I didn't used to talk about it. Not out of shame. I just thought this is boring. I'm just another guy who finally stopped acting like an idiot. And as if people have heard this story. There are better preachers out there for sobriety. But yeah, I talk about it a little bit. Um,
Was it was it something you were going towards or something you were going away from? Do you remember it all? I'm trying to remember the essay that I read about this, and I can't remember if it was more the positive or the negative that drove your intention.
um, I was so sick and tired of myself at that point.
Hmm.
I was so sick and tired of all the little rules I had making and had made and then broke. It was I can't even remember most of them now, but I just remember constantly going, "Oh, I'm gonna have this rule about the way I drink, or this alcohol, or this particular day of the week, or in this country I'll do this drug." And I mean, it was ludicrous, and I was just so sick of it. And I made progressively more foolish and foolish decisions. And yeah, I'll tell you the last time the language I would use is the last time I partied. We were living in Tamarindo, Costa Rica, and so this is a little insider tip for those of you who've never done drugs. If you want to get the good drugs, you befriend your dealers. You will be like a friend to them because these are usually pretty lonely people. They often wonder why people are their friends. But the closer you get to the dealer, the better deals you get on drugs and the better quality. Well, I moved kind of fast. I'd gotten used to this, and basically what had happened, I had a cocaine dealer, and I don't remember exactly how, but he was invited back to our apartment where my wife and I were living at the time. And my neighbor noticed this the next morning and kind of confronted me on it. He's like, "Geez, man, you brought a cocaine dealer to your place." And it sounds really bad now that I say it. To me at the time, it just had become kind of a coercive habit. And there were other choices I made that night, like driving the vehicle into town. And that was it for me. I'm very fortunate in so much that I didn't have to like serve jail time or accidentally end somebody else's life as one friend of mine is doing. Actually, both. He's in jail for manslaughter for operating a vehicle in a blackout state. Very nice man. Not a bad bone in his body. And the worst part is he has to live with knowing that he killed a father and a husband. And that's the part he can't forgive himself for. Jail is just this thing he has to do. I'm really fortunate that that's not my story. I count my lucky stars that I had enough. The bottom of my barrel wasn't so dark as other people's. But I didn't have a child who needed me. I didn't have to rise to the occasion. I didn't have a sense of purpose. I just was sick and tired of myself. So,
So, so thinking about your leadership work,
yeah.
and I've done a little bit of work in that space myself. Do you think it's easier for men to set goals and have a higher likelihood of achieving them going towards something or away from something? And there is research on this, and I won't
So
quote it
there's a right
today.
answer to this question. I might get it wrong.
No, there is no right. There's
So
no right or wrong.
yeah, this is my intuition is that toward. Um, this is why I'm thinking that. So an expat, as a person who lives outside of his the country of origin, it's been since 2013. I've noticed that there's a quality of the people that are expats or immigrants, if they prefer to call themselves that, in that most of the time we're running from something. It's the government or the country where we're from is corrupt or bad, and that's the problem. Or it's the people. I just can't take the people. It's my drug habit, and if I just move to another country, I won't have it. Whatever the problem is, it eventually comes knocking. After a few months, it catches up with us. Remember me? I'm still here. Now it's the government of the new country, or the people in this new country, or the better drugs that they sell in this country, the higher quality cocaine in Costa Rica than you couldn't have gotten in Los Angeles for a much cheaper price. They always find us when we run from something. I think that the thing that has worked better for my wife and I as expats is we've been focused on our initial idea, which was to challenge ourselves. That was always our intention when we left the U.S. It was not to get away from things, although I think I might have been trying to get away from my drug problem. I'm not sure. And so my intuition comes from that the stronger move is that we think about what we're running toward. You tell me
Mhm.
how close I am to getting it right.
Well, it depends. The research shows that depending upon the situation, the organization, the individual, it really does depend. So, one of the stories that the senior vice president of the division that I worked in at American Express, used to use was when we combined sales and client management, and everybody got together for the first time at some big confab that was, celebrated in Las Vegas. You get this big convention center hotel, and you
Mm-hmm.
take everybody out for great meals and parties and whatever.
Been
And
there.
he basically said, look, I know some of you are not happy with this merger of these two divisions, and you liked the way things were, but there's more opportunity in the direction that we're headed, which is why we merged these two organizations. So you got a choice. You can get on one of two sets of buses waiting outside the hotel. One of them's going to a fabulous party that celebrates us, and the other one can take you back to the airport. And, when you get home, you can apply for a different job.
Now, was this literal or was this figurative only?
Literal.
Oh
No,
wow,
literal.
there
He
are
did
two.
this on stage.
To have stood there and watched the people divide between the buses would have been entertaining.
Of course, nobody went back to the airport because that would have been career suicide.
Yeah.
But people got the message. Look, however you're motivated, a better future, or you don't want to be a part of this,
Mm.
you're going to have to set your intentions.
Yep.
Can I say with certainty that everybody who stayed lived up to their intentions to make the new vision work? No, not everybody did. When I recently rebranded this big insurance brokerage, a lot of people did not like the idea of where we were going from a company that sold insurance to a company that said, no, we solve company corporate problems with
Mm.
insurance. We solve individual problems with insurance. The insurance is just a means to the customer's greater goal. Not everybody bought into it.
Mm.
Even though we were saying we think there's more money to make trying to solve people's goals. We think we can differentiate ourselves better trying to focus on the customer's goals. It's individual. So, no, there's no right or wrong answer, but it is incumbent upon people to say to themselves, is it, am I more motivated by something I'm going towards, or am I motivated by something that I fear?
Yeah. And do we have a final clean answer on that?
I don't.
Yeah.
When I became a marathon runner, I ran 8 marathons in 4 years.
Wow, man.
And
Wow.
what I tell people is running the marathons was not the challenge.
Mm.
Training for the marathons
Mm.
was the challenge.
The
You show
process.
up on race day and you've got thousands, if not millions. I ran New York City Marathon. I had
Yeah.
millions of people cheering for me, along with 45,000 other runners. And you've got water stops and Gatorade stops and all of this support. When
Yeah.
you're training and you're doing a 20, 22 miler by yourself,
Mm.
which I did. The majority of my training was solo. You've got to go out and set your own water stops. You got to, you got to wear your nutrition with you. You got to set up a route that's going to not kill you, but push you to the limits. And knowing all the negatives, I know that my ability to achieve running 8 marathons was my intention to not think about the pain and the suffering, but the amazing feeling of showing up on race day and saying, I ran 26.2 miles.
Yeah.
So for me, in certain situations, it was the goal. The goal was set because my intention was I want to do something phenomenal. I
Mm.
love the feeling of doing something phenomenal versus other times where I've chosen jobs that I wasn't incredibly crazy about because, oh, it's going to make me more money. And I'm
Yeah.
not making enough money right now.
Yeah.
And that was the negative driving me. So, even I changed contextually.
Yeah. I can relate to that last one. I have a long history of taking jobs for the great money it was going to make me. I'm wondering, as we're talking about this, if we haven't maybe buried the lead a little bit on defining what we mean by intentions versus goals. And I'm wondering if people aren't listening to this going, what's the difference here? Because when I've pushed clients to think about their intentions, what I often get back is something that's SMART, organized, right? It is a SMART goal. And I'm like, that's
Yeah,
great, but that's not really your intention. I wonder if people know that.
correct. Funny that you should say this because just today I subscribed to the leadership emails from the Corn Ferry Company, KORN Ferry. And their newsletter today was about goal setting for 2026. And the author of this particular essay wrote about how, why are you motivated to achieve that goal?
Yeah.
And I think that's what intention is. Going back to what we tried to define it as earlier in the conversation is why? Why do I participate in the masculinity space?
Mm.
Because my intention is to free men from any restriction to being their fullest self. If a man does not want to be, in Scott Galloway's words, provider, protector, and procreator as their primary driver, but they want this sort of soft edge to procreator, which is I get an emotional kick from raising a child. I know part of raising a child means I have to go to work. I have to earn a decent salary with my partner. And I like that. I like that, but I don't want to sacrifice being able to maybe work from home a couple days a week so I can get the kid off the bus and see
Yeah.
them smile at 3:30 in the afternoon. I get a charge from my child seeing me being there and not seeing me at 6 o'clock at night when I finally get home.
Mm.
And my intention is to be a present dad who takes care of what dads should take care of or what parents should take care of. And that's my fullest self. That's why I am in the masculinity spaces. I don't want men to sacrifice a part of themselves because a narrative, a script has been written for them. And 20 years into being a dad, they realize, holy crap, I gave up so much for only one portion of this thing that I love.
Mm-hmm.
So my intention is, then has goals. How many impressions do I want from an essay? How many subscribers do I want? I would love for this thing to self-fund itself
Yeah.
through paid subscriptions and other things. I have goals,
Yeah.
but ultimately my intention is I don't want men to make the same mistakes I made.
So I heard you speak to why. That's where you started. And it sounds like you see intentions as mostly built around a why, but I also heard a lot of what's in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because this is
Because
I'm not sure I know the answer here as much as I talk about this and it's literally my brand. I'm not sure if I know the right answer for, I mean, this is where I live, right? I don't know the right answer.
You do.
of
Intentional eyes is in the title.
I know. And I I still grapple with, is this a matter of answering the why? Does the why spell out the what? Must one start with a why? Um, I mean, I really don't know, but it sounds like for you, it all starts from understanding your own personal mission statement, which is your why.
Yes. For me, it does.
Yeah,
My intentions for 2026 are built around that core aspect of me.
yeah. Have you laid those out already?
No, I have been
Okay,
too
I'm in
busy
good
with other
company.
things.
So it's good. No, it's fine. I think this is important because, right, it's like we're not coming to this conversation with like, look, guys, we figured this all out. Catch up, fellas.
No, not
Yeah.
by any stretch of the imagination.
Well, there's a gravity to this, right? I mean, what it feels like is you're trying to figure out the whole 12 months. And when I really slow down and think about it, the thing that's great about intentions is when I start to grapple with them, they're actually quite light. It's not so grave as trying to like map out 12 months. Like these really become North Stars for everything else that matters. And it is just as simple as taking some quiet time and asking myself, what is it I want to make happen this year? And to your point, like why? Why in the first place? It
Right.
might be easier to start with a why. I think the concern I have with why, I think that gets a little heavier for some of us. We can get really mired and like, I don't know. And then it's just we bounce off the project. But I believe that most of us can speak to a what at the very least. It probably is
Right.
easier though if one knows their why.
Yeah. I mean, I knew salespeople who would say to me, I freaking love selling.
Yeah,
I love
great.
objection handling.
Yeah,
So their why was that oxytocin dopamine effect of being in a situation that was a challenge. And like a puzzle, they figured out how to get the client to overcome their objections.
yeah,
Could they have said that to me, that that was their why? No, but if you listen to them closely, that was their why. So their
yeah,
intention was, yes, they wanted to be number one on the sales list at the end of the year, but their intention was every single prospect in my pipeline, I'm going to do my damnedest to help them close.
yeah,
And that was their intention.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's funny that the roles are a bit reversed in my marriage here. My wife is more that way. She understands when I belabor the point of the underlying elements of what matter, but at the end of the day, she's not really going to feel satisfied unless she's crushing whatever it is. I mean, if it's getting to the corner of the block before somebody or whatever, like winning is just hardwired into who she is, and that's not a bad thing. But we talk often about like figuring out some of the more foundational stuff underneath that, and she sees the value of that, but she still clears the desk and is like, yeah, yeah, yeah. But how do I win?
So we can keep going on forever because we have a tendency to do that when we get together. Um, let's start to wrap this up.
Okay,
And let's start with something a little bit more practical and less abstract.
okay.
Do you feel in your coaching, whether it was your leadership coaching or your current men's group coaching, that there's a practical process to setting intentions?
Yeah, I think you really spoke to it earlier when you brought this element of presence, um, which can be, and so now it's gonna. I don't want to get too abstract here, but let's keep it pedestrian. Presence in the way we all kind of know it. Just a little bit more than just being embodied in this moment, like just, and being, whether it's, taking time to pray or be quiet or just meditate, whatever one needs to just be, clear the deck for a second and then just ask, what are my intentions here? Is probably going to solve it for most people.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever that answer is, that's your intentions and it's the right answer.
Yeah. Stephen Bradford Long and I, when we did a discussion a couple of weeks ago,
Mm,
we talked about um, well, he introduced it from the Stoics, and then I mentioned that the Jesuits also do this concept called the examen,
Mm.
where you examine your day, examine, EXAMEN. It's a Jesuit practice to say, where did I see God today?
Mm-hmm.
Did I show up in a way today where I could have been better? And when I was still a practicing Catholic, and very much into the Jesuits, I used to practice that every single night. And I did find that those quiet moments lying in bed before I would shut my eyes, thinking through those core questions that the Jesuits ask themselves, that I did gain clarity about who I was and what my intentions were. Because if I was being honest with myself, I could say, oh, I got short with my son when he showed up late in front of the school when I was picking him up and I needed to get back home. And I would say to myself, well, is that your intention, Rich, to criticize your son because he was having a good time inside and he just couldn't leave his friends and you had something else going on? You know, is that being the father you want to be? And if you're honest with yourself in those situations, as Stephen and I discussed, I think you can start to get clarity around your intentions as a person and what you're trying to accomplish. So I
Yeah.
really liked Stephen's philosophy on that.
Yeah.
And
Um,
and you just reiterated it now.
yeah. There's a question I really like to ask after asking somebody what is it that they want to make happen. And that's, what is that going to do for you? And I think that deeper dive into what is it you want to make happen, because we might start with something very superficial like, oh, I want to be rich, or I want to win this race or whatever. But
Right.
the answer to the then follow up, which is, what is that going to do for you? And we can ask this of ourselves, I think starts to get closer to what you're talking about, which is the why.
Yeah.
And you can keep asking that, because sometimes the answer to what that's going to do for you has a deeper, great, and what's that going to do for you, until you kind of hit bottom on the what that's going to do, is really actually speaking to a why.
Yeah. It and meditation gives you the space to do that because if you are truly being present in the moment, you're saying, you know, at night, let's take my son's situation. You're sitting there at night and you're saying, I got upset with him. Boy, how stupid was that? I wasn't really present in that moment. I got
Mm.
triggered, by this need to get back on a Zoom call, whatever. Um, when you're posing different needs at the same time, being on that Zoom call, looking professional, getting ahead at work versus I have a son who really enjoys the company of his friends. And right now, because of the bus schedule, I have to go get him. Isn't isn't that a little more important right now? Is giving him the security of knowing he comes first, especially in the middle of a divorce, that he comes first. Doesn't that make you feel good as a father, Rich? And posing those against each other in this solitude of meditation kind of gives you that opportunity to go to ground yourself again in your intentions. And
Yeah.
maybe then give yourself the motivation the next time he's running late. You're going to say, you know what? I'm not going to schedule those Zoom calls around that time anymore. I'm going to
Mm.
I'm going to take the opportunity for me to make that mistake. I'm going to take it out of the equation and I'll only be dedicated to him. So you can achieve your goals of being great at work, being a good father through this examine process, which comes through solitude and meditation and honesty.
Yeah. I mean, you're preaching to the choir on that one. Yeah. All day long. Meditation has completely shifted my relationship with what is.
Yeah. Um, it took me a couple of years for that to finally metastasize inside me and truly govern
Yeah.
my life. And the one thing I would say to anybody listening to this is if you're expecting meditation to be some kind of overnight salve to your problems, probably not going to happen. That should not be your intention. But if you do practice it on a regular basis, as Damon wrote in today's Substack, if you do practice, it you really can change your brain.
Yeah. Yeah. A couple of years is fast, Richard. I think it was a good 5 or 6 before I started going, okay, I see where this is going. And that was
I
after
started
a retreat.
I started in '06. I'm pretty sure it was the first time I read John Kabat-Zinn.
Mm.
And I've read it twice since. Um, but it wasn't until around '09, I think, that someone said to me, "You're different. Something's different about you." So they noticed it and I didn't, because I guess it happened gradually over
Yes.
time,
Yeah.
that I could just be in that space and go. I remember taking my kids, to the Metropolitan, the Museum of Natural History in New York City under very stressful situation and just kind of being like, whatever.
Yeah.
And I remember that moment and saying to myself, who was that guy?
Beautiful dispassion. I love it.
Damon, I just want to wish you the merriest of Christmases, the happiest of holidays. Regardless of your goals, resolutions, or intentions for 2026, please make one intention, which is to join me again sometime early in 2026 to continue our conversation about tolerating men, about men tolerating themselves, and intentionalizing our lives so that we get more gratification from it.
Yeah, I'd be so glad to do that. Thank you so much for inviting me to do this. I love doing this. I love talking to you. And I also wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Thank you, brother.
Great. I appreciate it. And I thank you as well. Happy New Year.
All right.